that underlying assumption that everything works for you. Everything is working for you. It's just as the prairie works for the buffalo, so your life works for you. Everything is working for you. And so to live open-hearted is to risk pain and to risk loss, but also to experience love and freedom. Also to be able to be transformative and compassionate for another because you have known pain, therefore you're willing to be in the problem with them, willing to be in the pain with them. You become a bigger person, not a smaller one, for opening your heart. You are changing. You're impermanent like everything else. Your identity needs to be flexible. You don't need to defend so much. And if we do that, then we will not be pursuing so many false ways of being. I want to also talk about suffering today, fear, and all the negative things you've never wanted to talk about. Let's talk about those. Background. We on staff have been trying to think up a theme for next year, and so we discussed essentially what we thought of as the state of the world. And the state of the world, as we discussed it, it sounded like it could use some help, and we were thinking how we could help it. And it just coincided with this talk about fear. And so I've been reading the Buddhist ideas again, and I just want to think that this might be a pathway for us to wrap our minds around how to deal with things we can't change, things that happen to us, things that are happening around us, and things that happen in us. And I want to start off by first reiterating something I said earlier already, which is that we all so often think of ourselves as a separate being. We are contained within the skin, and we have a separate identity, and it's on that separate identity that we place so much emphasis, and we have so many expectations, and from there we have so many preferences. And I think maybe a more nuanced way of thinking of who you are is that you are like another animal in the world, in the ecosystem of wherever you live, and that if you can't really very clearly take, let's say, an animal out of its environment, you can't take a buffalo off the plains and it's still the same thing. And essentially their identity is connected to all the circumstances around them. All the food is there, all the way of travel, etc. It's all connected to their place. And so I think it is with you in your life. Even though we're really quite more mobile than most creatures, we can adapt to many more things. It is still the world environment that we live in, and we are not separate from that world environment. We are a part of it. And if you shift your identity slightly to where you begin to see that you and the environment are all one thing, whether it be the universe as a whole or merely nature, if you can expand your self-definition to include that, it may explain what's going on in your life more. Because as separate individuals, we feel so much like we should control the world, and yet we're not having a really good time trying. And it's often not agreeing with us. It seems like it's going one way and we were thinking the other. And so if we come back to who is that we that's thinking this, it is a fixed identity that we have chosen that starts with the skin, and we try to keep it our whole lifetime. It is the fixation on this is who I am that is part of the problem. Because when you say this is who I am, it's hard if you're young and you're getting old. It's hard if you're rich and something happens to your fortune. It's hard if you are just anything. It changes. Doesn't everything change? I mean, the most inescapable one and the most universal one is that we age. That we start out with really fresh, baby smooth skin, and we end up with cornrows. You know? And that's everybody that lives that long. And those that don't live that long, they experience impermanence in a more profound way sooner. But we are impermanent. And we are dynamically changing in that process. And the suffering often comes when we try to hold on to it as it was, as we understood it at one time. And the flexibility of that, being a flexible self, is part of the truth of who we are. And so the Buddha said there's impermanence, there's this self which doesn't have so many labels and boundaries on it as to what it is, but is dynamic. Those things really constitute more of who we are. And because we're trying to control everything, we tend to grasp for things to stay the way they are, or we grasp for something pleasant because it's unpleasant to feel the changes if we're resisting them, and therefore we develop bad habits, addictions, and etc., to get temporary relief, but they keep us from going into the place where we would have permanent happiness and joy. And they do it by giving us something that holds us over for a while, but amplifies the problem. Take the alcoholic or the drug addict who says, I just need another drink, which helps for a moment and then hurts. And this is the nature of most of our striving that is unhelpful. And so the Buddha and in the whole Buddhist practice is about getting us to a place where we can, instead of being controlled by these, start out by being curious about those things we do, and gradually begin to be so familiar with them that we understand them, that it comes naturally for us to drop them. Many of us will add to this fixed position a lot of shame and guilt, because we're doing this and some other things. But we're doing this addictive behavior or unskillful attempts to find happiness, and it begins a cycle. So take, for instance, let's say you're a little bit, you're irritated. And so one of the things you can do is yell at somebody. And then you can feel guilty about it, which doesn't get you anywhere in the long run. It's a temporary fix, a temporary release of something, but it isn't the permanent solution. And so the Buddhists have this very interesting idea, which is when you see fear, go toward it. When you feel pain, lean into it. When you recognize loneliness, experience it. Counterintuitive, granted. Because most of us avoid pain as much as we possibly can. But the leaning into it voluntarily, which is not to say go seek pain or be stupid about your life, right? Some people attract pain. Have you noticed? It's their way of being special, at least in their own mind. It's not that. It's when pain arises, and there will be pain, because that's just the nature of it. We don't have to add suffering to it by doing unskillful things to get rid of it, or by avoiding it and being frightened of it, or trying our best to do anything but experience it. If we could just accept that this is the nature of things, it is pleasant and unpleasant, it is hot and cold, it is left and right, up and down, painful and sweet. This is life. And if we really wish to live the awakened life, when it arises as pain, we don't do unskillful means to get rid of it. Instead, we meet it with curiosity and explore that which we don't really like until it becomes clear what it is, until we're okay with it. Now, in some pain practices these days, they're teaching mindful techniques in which you allow the pain to be there and meet it with curiosity rather than fear. Have you ever had a bad back? And you did everything to make it not hurt, which caused the rest of you to feel funny, right? If you can expand into the experience, not be in total resistance, there's the possibility that it will unfold and wash away. Now, I can tell you from personal experience, let me jump right to the bad use of this teaching I just gave you. Over 20 years ago, I was divorcing. I had just lost 2/3 of my financial world. I was out of a job. I was moving. I was pretty unhappy. I thought, let's do meditation retreats. I was also really down on myself. I had a lot of self-talk that you wouldn't want to hear. And I started these 10-day meditation retreats. And because the first one didn't go well, I thought I would do another one, which didn't go well, so I thought I'd do a third one, which was just like the other two. And what I was doing in meditation is something I would like you to never do, which is sitting in meditation. The way they design this is that you would develop a great deal of exposure to your inner life and a great deal of pain in your body because you sat for 11 hours a day, which doesn't sound bad at first, but if you're sitting on the floor for 11 hours a day, it hurts. Progressively, more and more, your back, your knees in particular. In that painful situation, bodily pain, there was also this emotional pain that I was going through because of all my losses and all the ways I had caused problems for other people and myself and yada, yada, yada. And one of the things they were doing was teaching body scanning, which is where you scan the body, you go down and you come back up. Now the trick with this is to scan the body, and when you reach a point of pain, you note it, but you keep moving. Well, me, I thought, I will just melt this with my concentration. And I tried day after day. Don't recommend it. Part of the process is to note things with a light touch and without condemnation and without, so you're afraid of something, so you're afraid of it. So you were a jerk, so you were a jerk. You touch it lightly. Think of the thoughts that arise in your mind like bubbles and touch them with a feather. Now me, on the other hand, I thought I would squish them to death. Didn't work. So part of what you need to know when I'm talking about this Buddhist practice here is a skillful way to deal with your pain and suffering. And that is not simply to wallow in it or to live there, but if you're to note it and then move on, to tap it, hello. And sometimes you will explore it. You'll go, what is the nature of this? Where does it hurt? How does it feel in the body? What is it related to, etc. You'll do that. But if you don't have the ability to drop it, then you get caught up in the suffering and you essentially, I don't want to use the word, but I will, wallow in it. You stay there. I was thinking about my talk earlier this morning. There were two young boys, young boys, but teenage boys, in the audience, and I was talking about this, and I didn't have as much time as I have with you, so I didn't tell them this thing. But suicide rates are up, especially in teens, because they get in there and they don't know how to get out. And they just think it's the whole world and it will never change. So they know part of it, which is to allow themselves to feel it, but they don't also realize that it's impermanent, that it will pass, And the way to treat it is also with a light touch, to be able to note it, to understand it. Don't go in it if you can, and just stay there. Like I did when I was meditating. I went into the pain and stayed there. You can go in there, you can greet the pain, be curious about it, and keep moving. Let yourself be skillful in this way. And so one way to practice meditation, if you're going to use this technique, is to practice it like this. You sit in meditation, and a thought arises, or a feeling arises, or any sensation, and you just call it, all of it, thinking. And you go, thinking. And the bubble, whatever it is, thinking, and let it disappear. And if it comes back, thinking. You don't make a big story out of it. You don't make yourself wrong for it. You don't tell yourself that you are just one of the worst meditators that has ever been. No one has as much trouble with this as I do. Thinking. Thinking, and let go. Let the world be in you, and you in the world. Let there be a totality of it. Don't get caught in the self-criticism. Don't let that become part of the problem. It is not helpful. It is not good for you. It is bad for you. Let me put it right on the table. Don't do it. It's bad for you to be so self-critical. Be curious about why you're doing it or why you did it. But come with curiosity, not with condemnation. So the reason we're doing all this is we think if we do this, we can come to happiness. And here's how the Buddhists say the happiness comes. It's essentially a heart job. It's essentially a heart job by being tender with yourself, being very compassionate with yourself and with other people. But let's start with you. So you come to suffering of some sort, and instead of running from it, you greet it with curiosity and interest. And you come up to it, and your wall breaks. Your shield, your identity begins to shatter somewhat. And inside there is your heart. Moist, vibrant, ready to emerge. And when it cracks, the light comes out. And that's where you go in. You expand the crack of that. So in some ways you do meet the pain and stay with it so that it can open your heart. It's a dance. You've got to be careful, don't wallow. But be curious and let it open. And the pain will be there. And you may feel deep sadness or the loneliness or maybe the pain or the embarrassment. You may feel that. Stay with it. Don't wallow, but stay with it. And hopefully what will happen is this heart will open and it will change that. Not necessarily in the twinkling of an eye. Don't ask for miracles. Just ask that you become very present to what it feels like to be this consciousness at this moment. And with your curiosity and your willingness to feel what's happening, you set the conditions for things to change, for one, but also for you to deepen. Deepen into who you really are. Because if we are trying to have a fixed and consistent, this is who I am, and yet you actually are changing, you're diminishing your whole existence. The butterfly comes when you leave the cocoon. You must get out beyond the wall, and that breaking of the wall that is hidden your heart is how the butterfly gets out. There's a story. A couple goes to Florida. They go to Florida. It's got to be hot down there. and they say, this doesn't look like a safe community, but if we buy into a gated community, I think we'll be okay. And so as they get older, they become more afraid because they go out less and less. And finally, they are having food delivered to them, and people do now have to come inside the gated community to cut the grass and all that stuff. But what's happening to them is they're beginning to distrust them because they haven't gone out and faced their fears. When they were small, now they are big. The whole world seems like a dangerous place. And so it is with our fears and our pains. If we just meet them as they come, they're only that big. But if we leave them behind the wall, we build the wall stronger and stronger, we don't let it happen, then the feeling of love and acceptance has a hard time getting out. That feeling of safety doesn't come from the wall, it comes from being willing to have this world be your teacher. Be the environment that moves your life in such a way that you wake up to who you really are. And if your intent is to be awake, then it is not done by hiding from life, but by the engagement of life, by being present to everything that's happening to you. Because I think there's an underlying assumption, and I don't think it's wrong, that underlying assumption that everything works for you. Everything is working for you. It's just as the prairie works for the buffalo, so your life works for you. Everything is working for you. And so to live open-hearted is to risk pain and to risk loss, but also to experience love and freedom. Also to be able to be transformative and compassionate for another because you have known pain. Therefore, you're willing to be in the problem with them, willing to be in the pain with them. You become a bigger person, not a smaller one, for opening your heart. You are changing. You're impermanent like everything else. Your identity needs to be flexible. You don't need to defend so much. And if we do that, then we will not be pursuing so many false ways of being happy. And we'll come full circle to where we're wide open. We're wise as snakes, but we're wide open. And this is how you deal with fear, with curiosity, maybe with respect, but with curiosity, testing to see if it's real or improper. You meet it, if it's inside you, you're afraid of what's happening to you, meet it with curiosity. And use a light touch. Don't forget to be light with your touch of yourself. No judgment zone includes you. The development of love and compassion is what the Buddhist says is the way to happiness. Let us be curious to see if he's right. Let us pray. Sometimes when we feel into our hearts, it feels like they're cold and asleep. So let us breathe into the center of our chest and invite the energy of the breath to awaken our hearts. And remember, you are more than your pain, or your fear, or your loneliness, or any of the losses. And your heart is big enough to handle it. Let your heart stay open. the details of your life are changing. But let that core of you, which is consistent, be there. An open heart and an aware mind. Meet the challenges with an open heart and a curious mind. And so it is. Amen. I hope you got something out of today's service. We intend to bring you things that will help you in your life become more of who you want to be, give you the freedom of forgiveness and the hope of expectancy that your life will unfold in a way that brings you joy, happiness, and is a contribution to the world. If you would like to contribute to this ministry, please go to unitytriangle.org, hit the donate button, and it will lead you into an easy way of doing that. We thank you for your attention and look forward to seeing you again here.